Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We're here with Nathan Yeung from FindYourAudience.online, and we're going to be talking about this concept of having a bolt-on fractional CMO team help you in your business. So we're going to be speaking today about what you can do to have effective marketing, for what you can do in your company, and so much more. So Nathan, glad to be speaking with you.
Thank you so much to have me on today, Robert. It's been I know we've been chasing one another for this podcast, so it's been great to finally get a hold of both of us.
Yeah, we finally made our schedules work, and that's how it happens sometimes, but luckily we made it. And so now that you're here, we need to make the most important use of our time and tell us what you're all about. Tell us what makes you unique, what makes you passionate, and how you can help businesses.
So I'm passionate about marketing for all kinds of reasons. I've really been marketing almost my entire life, but my professional career took me to other places. So I was actually a VP of finance at the age of 21, and then I was a management consultant. So a very different background. And I think that's what kind of differentiates me. My background isn't creative heavy. And I think a majority of time, I think a lot of marketing firms are very creative focused. And I think creativity is a huge thing, but creativity is only one cog in the wheel. I think that cog is sometimes the most important, but it's not always the most important. So in our sales deck, we'll often say, we don't necessarily believe the creative hammer is the hammer that fixes all marketing problems. Marketing is really a toolkit, and you can do a bunch of things about that. So a great example of what we do well is operations. And, the truth is, it's the unsexy part of marketing. It's the things that no one really wants to talk about, such as sales enablement tools, case studies, how well that gets distributed within the organization. Our goal is less focused on, and I know some people might cringe at this idea. It's less focused on this idea of like MQL inbounds. It's more focused on how do we amplify revenue, and what does that mean in the holistic perspective of that business, not just like this pigeonhole perspective of marketing.
I love it. And so I imagine that there are all these businesses that have been around and kind of limping along to this point, and things are maybe sloppy and things have been working just well enough. And with a team like yours, you can look at what's been working and make it work a lot better. So that way things can run more smoothly, be more predictable, and can scale. And so when you talk about these kind of boring, unsexy parts of business, like how does that break down? Is there like a logical starting point or a low-hanging fruit where just like all these companies you've seen, you're like, this is one thing where like anyone who isn't tapped into this can really implement this and make it a lot better?
Yeah, it's so simple. And I'm surprised that a lot of organizations actually really overlook it because they're so focused on chasing shiny objects. I go right back to sales enablement tools. Why? Because I go, look, you got to look at it in terms of like what's working. And what's working is you probably already have meetings. You probably already have qualified sales, right? You have people who have already expressed interest, are in that conversation, and are in that actual conversation of, potentially purchasing that service. So why not focus on all those things required to push them faster through that phase? And so I always tell companies to go back, look at the case studies, look at the category benefits that you excel at, the ones that you have a ton of track record on, and really make sure that you have all these types of marketing materials that really emphasize those category benefits you do better, and emphasize your wins and make those as tangible as possible. The more tangible you can make your results to a potential customer, the more likely they're probably going to close. So a lot of companies, when we go into the organization, we'll find case studies that are 15 years old, 10 years old, 5 years old, not accurate. Half the sales staff don't even know some of them exist. So there's like all these funny little problems about case studies. And I go, look, like if you really want to spend some money, we should be spending some money here, because this is literally the tools that are helping or amplifying your sales teams and pushing those people through that funnel. So it makes no sense why you're cheaping out on it. So that's literally like the most common problem. We see this in every organization. I haven't seen an organization where I've come in and be like, wow, your case studies and testimonials and everything are just up to date. I've really never seen that.
And you're bringing something to light that I probably think about every couple of months. This idea that no one likes to think about is the decay. right? Like you think about, well, you make a brand new website design, you find these case studies, you find these testimonials, you make a webinar with like all these real, like 4 or 5 real great success stories. And then you think, okay, I thought it was a one-time thing when I made it. I got myself so excited, so amped up. And then I got so busy in the day-to-day of acquiring customers, dealing with employees, traffic, putting out all the fires. Next thing you know, 5 years flies by just like that. And you realize all these case studies, like you said, they're out of date. People don't know they exist. It looks very dated. And then when you're inside the business, it can be like, I got so tired out 5 years ago, getting myself amped up and ramped up to do it. And so this is interesting because I imagine that your company, since this is like your bread and butter, or at least this is what you do on a regular basis, you already have the muscle built up, right? So you can already say, we've seen this thing with the case studies all the time, and we can just go in and go through and spruce this up. And so to give us a better idea of this sort of thing and what you do you have any fun success stories of your own to share? Like when you went to one of these companies and they kind of had things sort of in tatters or disorganized, and you went and worked your secret sauce, because that's the most exciting, right? The before and after pictures.
So I'm actually going to give some wild KPIs because I think this is like counterintuitive to most people who are listening. So we went into an organization and they're a sales-led organization. So you hear this term a lot, right? Sales-led versus marketing-led, blah, blah, blah. And so it's a sales-led organization, and we went in and it was not coming in with a perspective of making them into a marketing-led organization. Actually came into that organization with the perspective of amplifying the sales-led part of that organization, which is, again, something that I think a lot of people don't natively think marketing can do. So we actually literally cut down the MQLs because for reasons unbeknownst to me, they were creating assets across every single asset class possible. So think ebooks, think white papers, think webinars, think blog posts, think LinkedIn posts, think about partnerships and all these things. They had like 11 different things they were trying to produce, and they were just doing a piss poor job. So they had a ton of MQL. So on like a pigeonholed MQL perspective, they were crushing it. They weren't getting any damn sales though. They weren't getting anything. And so we literally cut that entire program. We went back to the basics. We went into really focusing on the sales teams and exactly the tools that they're using. We cut the MQLs by half. We brought top line revenue up by $1 million in a year. So you go, well, Nate, your MQLs weren't very good. I'm like, yeah, I know it was because you had shitty MQLs, and we've brought up the general conversion quality of each of those MQLs. And not only that, we've amplified sales. We've made sales more productive. We've got them working better, so they're closing better, they're closing faster. And I think that's a perfect example where the KPIs are literally off, what contextually a lot of people expect. They expect it to be more MQLs and $1 million. No, this is the opposite. I cut MQLs by half and I've increased revenue by $1 million. That means I've doubled or tripled the quality of those conversions, and I've likely increased, obviously, the conversion amongst the different phases of the funnel.
It seems like just from these first few minutes of speaking with you that I think it seems like a big secret of your success is on kind of stripping away the excess, because a lot of people say, well, I need to be in all these new markets. I need to do ebooks. I need to, be in all these different niches. And you say, well, instead of spreading yourself so thin, why not double down or triple down on what's already working with you? And instead of building this huge prospect list of all these people that who even knows what you're doing or who knows if they convert, you say, the list you have, you can really focus that in. And there was something you said when we began speaking was of shortening the time to get to that sale. And so I think that's really important to think about, is people always have this, I think, picture in their mind of like a map, right? And they're like Genghis Khan, just like spreading throughout the world. And they say, I want to just like have world domination. And you say, well, what you think is world domination is just kind of spinning your wheels and spreading yourself thin. And what the world domination should be is on saying, well, what are my numbers, right? And instead of just saying like, I'm going to do all this activity, you say, well, here's my assets and here's what I want to do to increase my customer value and make convert more of my prospects into customers and convert it more money instead of just all these sort of feel good goals and feel good metrics.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's because marketers do such a great job promoting these feel good metrics that every other executive feels good about them. For those that are listening, there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect basically talks about the psychology of how we are far more optimistic of our capabilities than we actually really are, regardless of the rational explanation behind it. So it's this beautiful chart where basically at the beginning, it says, I'm extremely confident, then followed by a steep curve saying, I really don't know anything. Oh God, this is a lot harder. Oh wow, this is actually pretty difficult. And it's basically this example of appreciation. And going back to the Genghis Khan, rather than world domination, why not world domination by owning all the ports would be, I guess, the analogy. Instead of looking at trying to own all the land, why don't we focus on strategic points? And that's really the perspective that I come from. And that's really driven from my management consulting background, where I go, this makes no sense. You don't even have a maximum capture or reach within a channel. So why are you worried so much about going across channels, right? It's no different when you're like an e-commerce company and you're selling into a specific category. A great example is Lululemon. Can you imagine if Lululemon first started and then, rather than capturing more than 25% of leggings for yoga, they went straight to shoes? Like, they're not going to do well. Right? There's no possible way they're really going to do well in that market. They're not going to penetrate well. They don't have critical mass behind it. They don't have great marketing behind it. So why would someone want to buy Lululemon shoes over Nike shoes or Under Armour shoes? They're going to shoes now. Why? Because they've more or less reached a level of saturation inside of their category. So it makes sense for them to go into adjacent categories. The same thing is true just in channel management and media spends. If you're not reaching 90% of your channel or maximizing your spends on Facebook, why are you looking to do LinkedIn? If you're not maximizing 100% of UGC, user-generated content on TikTok, why are you trying to go into LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat? You barely can do one channel well, and now you want to do other channels. The likelihood of you operationally executing well is low. The likelihood of you having the money to do it well is low. So this idea, this hopefulness, this overconfidence that we have is literally in every organization. And I really go in there and I'm a little blunt and I just go, look, you're doing a piss poor job. Just got to own that, and you just got to move away from this perspective that you need all these things. The reality is you have things that are working. You're not maximizing that method. Let's maximize that method. And then let's look about spreading ourselves into different markets or different channels and then trying to get more reach and exposure there.
I love it. So the problem is that most of these businesses are spread thin and maybe even a little bored, right? They say, oh, we're bored with Facebook ads. Let's go to these other channels. And you say you've done so many things right, but you're not even paying attention to what the successes that you should repeat. So that's why it takes this outside person such as yourself to look at that data and figure out that strategy. And so when dealing with these companies and fixing up the problem, has anything surprised you? Do you have anything fun to share about how, you went in to solve a problem and it ended up taking an unexpected turn?
Oh, that's a great question. Ended up solving a problem, and yeah, so we ended up solving a problem. This is actually probably in our earlier days, and then we end up selling into a brand new market. So it wasn't actually something that we changed up the messaging and we ended up expanding the market. And that was an unintended consequence, which was obviously a very positive one, but it was not intended. It was not, the whole point was, let's clean up messaging, let's make it a bit more tight, and then let's relaunch based on the channels that we're currently already on. So we relaunched, and then what we ended up doing is we ended up entering into a different community based on that messaging, and then they end up liking it. So this goes back to this perspective where a lot of people are like, well, it's already working, so why do I need to do more? Well, the whole point is that, well, you don't know what you're actually missing, right? So this is a great example. The messaging of the company was fine. They were making sales. They're like, why are we doing a messaging exercise again? This makes no sense. We completed the messaging exercise. We relaunched. Sales were good, but then we started noticing a brand new market come in based on demographics. that was the moment where we're like, oh, this is interesting. And then it started getting more. And then so essentially that messaging attracted a brand new market that customer didn't really like know that they were interested in their product. And I can't disclose exactly who they were. So I think this is, again, that perfect example, that Dunning-Kruger effect. It's like, well, I'm confident. I know marketing. We're doing fine. We don't need any more of this. And then we do something as simple as just a messaging like exercise to really tighten up everything and relaunch. And then you find out there's this whole new market that's really interested in your product that you never knew existed, never knew that they cared, and they're buying from you right from the get-go. So now we've increased revenues by 20 to 30%. Plus you've got a brand new market you can now saturate. So it's, I think that was surprising because it was not intended. We knew that we were going to increase sales in the current market. We didn't know that by relaunching, we were going to end up going into essentially a new demographic, like a different ICP that was not planned.
Fantastic and a lot of fun. And so it definitely drives the point home how important it is to have someone like you to look at the data and to blend the art and the science, because we're mentioning a lot of here, this Dunning-Kruger effect, where that concept, it helps you at first, right? It helps you kind of go forward, because without that, you might not have had enough confidence to take some of these risks and build the company and grow to the point where you've now kind of slowed down. But then now it's time to transition, to shift to a different mindset and have someone like yourself and look at this and kind of study and make these decisions and notice these things that kind of come out of the data that you've been mentioning that have happened here. And so I checked out your website a few minutes ago, and I was really impressed with this idea of sort of the bolt-on CMO, because a lot of these companies, I'm sure, with this Dunning-Kruger, they're probably a little bit arrogant, right? They're like, why should I hand my marketing over to someone else and replace it? And it seems really scary. But this idea of someone like you coming in different tiers and different degrees and then working your magic, and then someone can say, like, look at what you've done, look at the results. I'm so thrilled. I want to continue. It's less of a commitment, right? It's less throwing your company into the hands of someone else. So can you explain your company and your solution and what you do and why it's better than these other possibilities companies may have considered?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting because I and other CMOs that are listening might hate me for saying this, but I think, frankly speaking, unless you're a massive organization, like an absolutely monster, we're talking $50 million or more, with easily marketing budgets of more than 2 to 3% of your top line revenues, having a full-time CMO doesn't necessarily really make sense. A full-time CMO is really looking at incrementality, looking at brand new markets, looking at how to enter those markets, really looking at the vision, generally creative to a certain extent, depending on the archetype you hire. So realistically, like a workload of a CMO, is just more management than it is actually creative and strategy direction driven. So the idea that a smaller organization needs that full time, that's really kind of not required. Realistically, it comes in kind of phases. So, if I were to just simplify this, it could almost come on a quarterly phase where every quarter the CMO comes, reassesses the tactics, and then essentially rearranges the priorities or brings new suggestions to the table, and then kind of executes on that after they've done, obviously, a foundational exercise to build out the marketing foundations, the marketing plan, the strategy, the positioning, and all that lovely stuff. So the concept of having a full-time CMO, I think, is a wasted effort. A majority of companies need tactical execution. You need me, or you need someone similar to me for a fractional period of time. Again, unless you're a $50 million company and you're just like aggressively growing and you're constantly needing to iterate. So that was kind of the whole model with Find Your Audience, where I was getting frustrated, essentially giving strategy and then seeing execution fall off the earth, because it would be given to a company that may not be fully capable to execute. So it was this whole idea. It's like, why can't I be a fractional CMO and also have the team and be accountable so that we're fully aligned? So that not only when I deliver the strategy, I'm also accountable on the execution of that strategy. So therefore, like, I can't just like scapegoat this and be like, well, your executors are terrible. This is my strategy. This is my team. This is my execution. I'm fully accountable and fully aligned. And I just found like a lot of marketing companies don't follow that. And it bothers me because I think, how can you be tactical and not know whether or not it's a good idea? So a great example is, we need a website. Might be a good idea, but might not be the highest priority. So if you're doing that, that's not necessarily going to bring them what they need. And then the strategy person just saying, here's the strategy, see you later. So both sides, if you're only doing one end, I find is not aligned, because either you're an order taker or you're an order giver, but then you're an order giver not accountable, order taker not knowing the situation. And so therefore, neither parts of that service seem good to me. So I wanted to combine them, and that's essentially what Find Your Audience is. So we provide the fractional CMO strategy, and then we're held accountable to execute. And I think that's the best way for marketing to be aligned with any organization.
Seems like a lot of fun. You're bridging the gap, and you're bringing this much needed service of the thinking that's required, because I think we've all been there. We've all gotten like consulting or critiques about our website or this marketing plan, and we get all these plans, and then I look at it and I'm like, okay, so now I need to think this through and kind of translate it, and there's that disconnect versus the kind of going through the motions, going through the day-to-day. And so this is a really interesting and cool approach and service that you provide here to get these companies on track, and to kind of point the company in the right direction and keep it more or less on track, versus trying to play catch up or just giving advice that is then not followed upon. And so this is very excellent. And if someone says, I want to look more into this fractional CMO concept from Nathan and Find Your Audience online, how does someone know if their company is a right fit for you? And if they do, what's the next step to take?
It's pretty easy. The right fit is if this is how you're feeling, you don't know where your marketing is, you don't know where to start, you don't even know how to reassess. That's probably the perfect time just to pick up a call or find me on LinkedIn and shoot us a message to have a discovery call. We'll help create a basis for that. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to be engaged. And then depending on the level of service, you're either going to get the advisory, which is just high level, which means we're helping, or B, you're going to get the full service where we're actually providing the strategy and executing. Typically, our companies are Series A and above, or typically $1 million of revenue or more. And then on a headcount perspective, I would say ideally we work with at least one person internally who is accountable full-time for marketing. That's kind of best case scenario. In often cases in larger organizations, we will be the entire marketing department. So if you have no marketing department and you're a $10 million company and you want one, we're kind of a great example of that. So for Constellation Software, that's often the model that we move forward with for some of their portfolio companies. So yeah, and then if you want to just learn more, you can just find me on Instagram and listen to my talking head all day, because I literally post videos every single day on marketing and consumer psychology.
Very excellent. Well, I noticed just the other day that I have a lot of respect for people that are consistent. There's so many people out there where you see them and they have advice, and then they're not consistently on social media and with their messaging, and they don't know what they want. They don't stand for something. So everything that you said there about you're posting and you're doing the discovery call, all of that is very impressive. And so findyouraudience.online is the website. And then to look you up on LinkedIn or Instagram, that's Nathan Yeung. Last name is spelled Yeung. And check it out. You have everything to gain and nothing to lose by knowing that you have this problem that should be solved, and starting this conversation with Nathan and his team at findyouraudience.online. And I know you have to leave in just a minute here, Nathan, and go and take that baby to where he needs to go. But before I let you go, can you tell me, do you have a number one favorite lesson, or is there advice that you wish you'd gotten 20 years ago? Anything come to mind?
I do, and it's actually a model that I'm putting in a new course I'm making, which is actually just this idea where it's so simple. It's so simple, and it applies to so many different things. The reality is that when you're constrained with resources, whether this is the organizations we're working with, it always comes down to a couple things. You have one shot. If you got to almost think about everything you do, you got one shot. And when you think about it that way, it makes a lot more sense, because you have to perform. So a good example is, that company that was doing 11 different assets. Now let's just say, imagine one of those assets actually got to their ICP, got in front of their ideal customer, but was just so poorly executed that ideal customer looked at that and was like, what the hell is this? And just discarded it. You have lost that customer and you've gave them a negative impression. So this idea of focus, this idea of specialization, this idea of also being quirky, bizarre, different, on your first attempt at anything marketing, I think is really, really important. Because if you think about it, you got one chance, you got maybe 2 impressions at that person to make yourself mentally convenient to them. You gotta get out of your comfort zone, and you got to be highly specialized, because you got to be able to sell in such a small period of time to that one person. So specialization, focus, and really being different. And not necessarily just like a different way, but like in like a bizarre way, maybe. And another podcast, I talked about how we did billboards that were upside down intentionally. People were like, what? So I think that I don't do it enough for my organization. And after my last 6 months, I've been reading consumer research articles and research a lot. I'm going to be really reinforcing that in all my organizations and all of our clients, just because there's a lot of research that backs up this. So that's what I would say. I would do everything a little bit different and put a little bit more effort, and think you only got one shot. Everything's got one shot. One ad, one shot. One email, one shot. If you think about it that way, I think everyone would do better.
I love it. One shot, focus, specialize, and be different. And with that, head on over to findyouraudience.online. We will see you there. And thank you very much, Nate, for giving us all these harsh but necessary lessons, things for us to think about. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Robert.